Greetings, new rejects, and welcome. Today we're going to be discussing the basics to survive the unforgiving streets of Tertium. Darktide is unique to many other co-op shooters, requiring a different approach to dealing with enemies, especially in close combat. Unlike many other titles, firing and maneuvering is not guaranteed to keep you alive. Large engagements will almost always turn into melee, meaning you will have to know how to stand and fight. The most basic bit of advice I can offer is to stay together with your team. The in-game tutorial teaches you this from the very beginning for a good reason. Being in coherency with your teammates lets you passively regenerate toughness, allows you to benefit from class-specific feats, and will prevent the AI director from spamming elite and special enemies. Class deficits. For example, the Ogryn can handle hordes very easily, but he is almost helpless against even a handful of shooting enemies, especially when tied up in melee. Next, and this is a big one, when you are forced into melee, remember to block and dodge enemy attacks. Many new players believe they can just hack their way through hordes, especially if they spend a lot of time on the lower difficulties. While your lethality will scale with higher level equipment, the scaling of enemy health and numbers means simply hacking away at a horde will quickly get you overrun. Blocking and attacking will initiate a push attack, and holding the attack key down will apply a swift counterattack as well. Depending on the weapon, these push attacks and counterattacks are a great way of pushing yourself out of a corner. Side dodging seems to be a little bit more effective than simply back dodging enemy attacks. Enemies like maulers and crushers have long range melee strikes that may still connect with you when you dodge to the rear. This is a skill that does take practice, as you've probably noticed in some of my footage, I too still miss blocks and dodges. Also, make sure you listen for the audio cue for enemies attacking out of field of view. This gives you enough time to respond with a quick block. For my third tip, make sure you share ammo and grenades with teammates. This should be a no-brainer, considering this is a cooperative experience and everyone benefits from a team being well stocked on ammo. If you constantly find yourself running low on ammo, remember that you do have a melee weapon as well, and if you have a veteran on your team, you will passively regenerate ammo over time with special and elite kills. For whatever reason, the AI director also likes to spawn in additional elites and specials when the team is low on ammo, so another thing to keep in mind when you see an ammo box. You can also check on your teammates' ammo levels by looking at the ammo icon next to their name on your HUD. From what I've gathered, yellow means below 50%, orange means below 25%, and red means empty. Number 4 is a common tip for any co-op game, but make sure to coordinate with your team before making any team-affecting decisions. That includes picking up grimoires, dropping health or ammunition, or hitting buttons to trigger hordes or progress to the next phase. Grims especially can be frustrating since they take a fair amount of your health away on pickup. I have had countless runs ended where we were barely holding on and a careless teammate picked up a Grim, making our health diminish even further. Also consider who should be picking up Grims. Typically we designate the player with the most health or the one who's taken the least damage through the match. This is important because if you die with a grimoire, it's gone for good. It is also important to remember that health kits only restore missing health and not corruption damage. Corruption is indicated by purple segments on your health bar. To get corruption cleansed, you will need to use a Medicae station. Number 5 is almost as important as learning to block and dodge, and that is to learn the attack combos for your melee weapon. Light and heavy attack combos have a series of attacks that are done in succession. Each attack usually attacks from a different direction, but can also use a different attack style. Some may be a single assassination attack, others might be a heavy overhead strike down, or wide sweeps that stumble or cleave through many enemies. Looking at these combos by inspecting the weapon lets you get a general idea of how the weapon is intended to be used. Lots of sweeping attacks, likely for crowd control or horde clearing. Lots of strike downs, probably a weapon geared for killing elites or heavy enemies quickly. Now that you've learned your combos, the best thing to do is practice them in the meat grinder, which is my next tip. Sure, knowing the combos is very important, but you need to know how they perform on enemies. The meat grinder can give you a good indication of how each enemy type will respond to different attacks, whether they be melee or ranged. It also is a good place to find the relative weak points and armored areas on each enemy. Hint, not all enemies are vulnerable to headshots, especially the mauler. Using cover and corners to protect against melee and range threats can also make combat much easier. Using map features to limit your exposure can prevent you from being overwhelmed, especially against a horde or ambush. The game does have a fair amount of chest-high cover to crouch behind, However, if you are an Ogryn without a slab shield, you will either have to use corners or large obstacles to protect yourself. Daemon hosts are a common enough threat, especially on Malice difficulty and above. They can be completely avoided if players do not disturb them or engage with them, or wander too close with an illuminated flashlight. If you do happen to trigger a demon host, unless they are slain, they will kill 2 players before disappearing. Ogryns, thankfully, with a slab shield can tank them indefinitely if they hunker down. Lastly, make sure you understand your class's role. Each class can fulfill a wide variety of duties and can be further expanded or specialized on based on what weaponry and feats you take. Don't feel too pressured to learn the meta way to play the game, but have a basic understanding of what your build can handle and what it needs help with so you can make a much better team player. For example, Psykers shouldn't be the team's primary crowd controller when you have an Ogryn with a slab shield and rumbler. Overall, while Darktide can be an intimidating game at first, especially if you play Malice or above early on, learning how to play as a team and the basic functions of your class can go a long way in making the learning curve much less daunting. If there was 3 things you should take away from this video, they are stick together, right click to block, and communicate with your team. If you would like more detailed breakdowns of each class, check out my Darktide class guide videos. Let me know if you have any advice you wish more players knew about in the comments. Thank you again for watching, but until next time, happy hunting, rejects.